The execution of Jesus of Nazareth took place around the time of the Passover on 14th of Nisan 30 AD. After the execution, the body of Jesus went missing, and various rumours and stories have been circulating since that time. The purpose of this court is to investigate what happened to Jesus of Nazareth after his execution. There are a number of witnesses to the inquiry. It's my task to put questions to them in order to ascertain the truth of the matter. We will be inviting 8 witnesses to give evidence and be available for me to question. The first is Pontius Pilate. What is your name and title?
So I am Marcus Pontius Pilate. I am governor of Judea. I was appointed by the Emperor Tiberius Caesar Augustus.
Is it correct that Jesus of Nazareth was brought to you for trial on the 14th of Nisan?
Yeah, that is correct indeed.
What was the verdict of that process?
Well, personally, I couldn't find any fault with him. He'd been stirring up the Jewish authorities. They were very angry with him, and they brought him to me. I thought it was just a local matter, to be perfectly honest, but the crowds were all stirred up. They were rabid. They thought they might riot. They wanted this man's blood, and, well, I couldn't in all conscience just send him to his death. Then I had this idea. We had in the prison a man called Barabbas. He was a murderer, really awful man, and there's a tradition that you can release somebody, have them pardoned and released. So I thought, okay, I offered them the choice. They could have Barabbas, the murderer, or Jesus, the agitator. I knew who I wanted to be released and back on the streets. However, the crowd were insistent that they have Barabbas. I think the Jewish authorities, in some way, the priests were coercing people, stirring them up to seek it out. But you know what? Nothing I could do. I washed my hands of it publicly and let them have Jesus for crucifixion. As I say, it's nothing to do with me, really. It's a local matter.
What happened to the body of Jesus after the crucifixion?
This man called Joseph of Arimathea turned up, asked for the body, said he had a tomb ready to put him in. So that's what we did.
Did you give permission for Jesus to be taken down from the cross immediately after it was requested by Joseph of Arimathea?
Yeah. Once they're dead, you can do what they like with the body. They're dead.
What did you do to ensure that Jesus was in fact dead?
Well, the guards make sure that somebody is dead. Now, crucifixion, it's a long and painful process, and is meant to be. And, we're quite proud of that, to be perfectly honest. Now, this man, Jesus, he was dead within a few hours. And clearly at that point, you want to make sure that somebody isn't faking it. So the centurion got a spear, stuck it up into the bodily cavity, right up into the heart. And at that point, all the requisite bodily fluids poured out. And, at that point, he's dead. You can't really fake that amount of blood coming out of somebody.
Did you have the tomb guarded?
Yeah, we did. The priests had this idea that his followers would steal the body. They'd start going around saying he'd raised from the dead. And so I thought, well, the easiest thing to do, I lent them a guard, 4 guards to guard the tomb.
Did the tomb still contain the body of Jesus at midday on the first day of the week following the crucifixion?
Apparently not. Despite the guard, the tomb was empty.
Are you or any other Roman authorities able to produce the body of Jesus?
No, we're not. It's nothing to do with us. It's a local matter. As far as I'm concerned, it's all finished.
Thank you. You may stand down. The next witness will be the Roman centurion responsible for the custody of Jesus following his arrest. What is your name and rank?
Well, my name is Sextus Fabius Valus. My rank is the Centurion Histatus of the 2nd Cohort, Gallica, Legion 3, stationed at the Antonia Fortress, Jerusalem.
What were your duties at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth?
I was the officer commanding the crucifixion detail. I was responsible for the efficient conduct of the crucifixion itself and for public order in the immediate area of the execution, responsible with my armed guard to mete out the sentence of capital punishment.
Was Jesus of Nazareth the only prisoner to be executed on that day?
No, there were 2 other prisoners crucified alongside him, bandits who had committed terrorist offences.
Can you describe how the crucifixion was carried out?
Well, the prisoner is fastened to the cross by either nails or rope. In this case, nails were used. The feet and arms were both nailed to the cross, and the prisoner was left to hang by the wrists and by the ankles. The prisoner would remain on the cross for some hours in pain until he gradually lost consciousness. When consciousness was lost, death would follow quickly. But the victim was left on the cross until there was no doubt about death.
Was there anything unusual about this crucifixion?
Not really. The prisoner, Jesus, was in a worse physical condition than was usual because he had been flogged and beaten on various occasions during his trial. That was immediately before his execution, of course. He'd been given no water. Flogging before a crucifixion is quite usual, but this prisoner was hardly able to walk and was unable to carry his cross to the place of execution without help. I mean, it's 2 or 3 miles from the Praetorium to Golgotha, and some way into the journey he collapsed. But despite some vigorous encouragement, he could go no further, and we coerced another man, a Cyrenian. I didn't make a note of his name, but I think it was Simon, as I seem to remember. And he carried the crossbeam the rest of the way up the hill to where the man Jesus was to be executed. He was also bleeding from the head because he had been made to wear a crown of thorns. That didn't interfere with the process of execution. I mean, all we'd done was fashioned a crown of thorns and forced it down onto his head. This was done to mock him because some of them with him had said that he was the king of the Jews, but we had to show him he wasn't the king of the Romans. But I think what was more unusual was the behavior of the prisoner Jesus. Most of the people we crucify curse and swear from the cross, particularly at us for crucifying them. Jesus of Nazareth didn't do any of this. In fact, he actually prayed for our forgiveness. And we raised up the cross with the prisoner Jesus nailed to it, and there he hung till he expired.
How long did the crucifixion take?
Well, I didn't keep an exact record, but around 6 hours, give or take, from the 3rd hour of the day until the 9th hour.
And was this a typical time?
Well, I think it was shorter than usual because of their local religious customs. The authorities had wanted the execution over before the 12th hour because their feast of Passover was to start at that time. And as is the custom in these situations, we speeded up matters by breaking the legs of 2 of the prisoners with a large wooden pole. Jesus of Nazareth, in my opinion, was already dead, so we didn't break his legs.
What precautions did you take to make sure that Jesus of Nazareth was really dead?
Well, while he was still hanging on the cross, I had one of the legionnaires thrust a spear into his side from below. This would have gone into his heart, and as the spear came out, blood and water gushed out freely onto the ground. which to me was a sure sign that this man was indeed now dead. And then the body was left on the cross until all the prisoners were brought down. And after this, his body was examined. The prefect, Pilate, requested a further examination, and we carried this out as well. There was no doubt that Jesus of Nazareth was dead.
What experience of crucifixion have you?
Well, during my time in the Roman army, I have assisted in more crucifixions than I can care to remember. Crucifixion is a common practice here in Judea, and my duties have caused me to attend many of them as officer in command. I have considerable experience in carrying out this kind of duty. I do not keep account, but I imagine it to be hundreds, if not thousands.
Have you ever known a crucifixion which failed to kill the prisoner concerned?
No. Crucifixion is very reliable. That's why it's used so much.
Were there any other unusual points about this crucifixion?
Well, yes. From the 6th hour, which is noon, there was an unusual darkness. This lasted until the death of the prisoner Jesus at the 9th hour.
Did you form any opinion that this prisoner was unusual?
Well, yes, I did, really. In view of his behaviour on the cross, I believe that he was an exceptional man. In view of the speed of his death, I formed the opinion that he was an innocent man under the protection of heaven. I've seen many men die, hundreds, if not thousands, probably. But I don't think I've seen any man die in the way that this man died and the way he was on the cross. I have to confess, I'm not usually moved, but I was moved by him. And I think I said he was a righteous man.
Thank you. Please step down. Call Joseph of Arimathea. What are your name and occupation?
I am Joseph of Arimathea. I was a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Religious Council. Other than that, I'm a man of private means.
Were you in the Sanhedrin at the trial of Jesus of Nazareth?
I was a member of the Sanhedrin, but I was not present during the trial.
Please can you tell the court what you did on the day of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth?
I was appalled at the sentence of death having been passed on Jesus. So for that reason, I stayed away during the crucifixion. When I heard that it was all over, I went to the governor, Pontius Pilate, and asked for Jesus' body, at least to give him a decent burial. The governor made me wait while he confirmed that Jesus was in fact dead. When he had confirmed it, he released the body to me. I came with some linen and some of the women of Jesus' company. We wrapped the body in the linen, put some spices on the top, and then we laid Jesus' body in the tomb. Now, we had to work quite quickly because of the coming Sabbath, but we were done by the 12th hour. And the last thing that we did was to roll the big stone into the entrance to the tomb.
Can you describe the grave?
Yes, it's carved out of the rock. It's a chamber, and it's got a narrow passageway that leads to the outside. It was quite empty when we put Jesus in there. And it's got a large stone at the entrance to the tomb, which takes the effort of a few people, quite a lot of effort from a few people to move the stone.
Is the body of Jesus of Nazareth still in the tomb?
No, the tomb is quite empty now.
Did you have the body removed from the tomb?
No, Jesus rose from the dead by himself, and he's in heaven.
Is there any possibility of a mistake? Did you go to the wrong tomb?
Absolutely not. It's my own tomb. I plan to be buried in there myself when I die.
Could the body of Jesus have been confused with some other body that was in the tomb?
Absolutely not. The tomb was empty when we put Jesus in it, and it's empty now.
You may stand down. Our next witness is a different kind of witness. He is an expert medical witness who is going to comment on the crucifixion of Jesus from a modern medical perspective. Call Dr. Simon Parsons. You are Dr. Simon Parsons?
Yes, that's correct.
Dr. Parsons, for the benefit of the inquiry, would you please state your qualifications and your current employment?
Yeah, I'm a medical doctor and consultant surgeon, practicing in Nottingham, FRCS, DM and MBBS. So I have all the qualifications, and to practice as a surgeon, I operate regularly in the abdomen and in the chest. So I'm familiar with the anatomy and the injuries that are likely to take place from the conversation that we're having about Jesus Christ and the injuries that he suffered.
Thank you. We have heard evidence that Jesus of Nazareth was taken by the Jewish leaders and brought before the Roman governor Pilate, that he was whipped, made to carry his cross, and then crucified. Could you explain the effect of such treatment on a human body and the likelihood of anyone surviving such an ordeal?
Yes, certainly. So perhaps it would be useful to separate the injuries out as according to the account that I'm aware of. So initially, Jesus of Nazareth was beaten by Roman soldiers, and a crown of thorns pressed into his scalp. Now, those are not life-threatening injuries. They're severe injuries. They would have caused significant trauma to Jesus, and certainly you can get significant bleeding from scalp injuries, but they aren't sufficient to cause death in itself. That injury was followed by scourging, which is having your back whipped by a whip which often contains pieces of bone or metal, and the multiple whippings can lead to death in itself, but the purpose is to torture the individual and not to kill them. And Jesus survived that, but he would have lost significant amounts of blood from that injury, as well as the beating and the crown of thorns. So then Jesus, according to the account, Jesus then was forced to carry his cross a couple of miles, and before the actual crucifixion, he collapsed during that time, probably because he was already in a weakened state from the injuries that he had sustained. Then we move on to crucifixion, which of course is the mode of death, and crucifixion was a pretty barbaric means of death. And the injuries that are sustained are that you have a huge nail bashed into the wrists, between the small bones of the wrists on each hand. That causes significant or massive pain and a bit of bleeding. It often goes through the median nerve, which is therefore horrifically painful. And then the feet are often nailed together, so on the upright. So the injury and the mode of death from crucifixion is asphyxiation, essentially. because when you're hanging on the cross, if you take the weight on your arms, then your chest sags and you can't breathe. And the only way you can breathe is to lift the weight of your body through the legs, through the feet, which are nailed onto the cross. And that might give you a temporary relief of asphyxiation and allow you to breathe. But unfortunately, well, obviously it's extremely painful to take the weight through the feet, through the nails. And so the patient collapses and the whole process starts again. So you go from taking the weight on your feet and your legs, but then you can't endure that anymore. And so you collapse and the weight comes through the arms. And as a result of that, the patient is unable to breathe. And over a period of hours and sometimes days, the patient or the person will die from asphyxiation. Now, that, as I say, normally takes a matter of hours or a day or two. It has been reported that individuals, particularly strong individuals, could survive for several days, but that's pretty uncommon. And in the account that we're given, I understand that the Roman soldiers attended the crucifixion to check, to break the legs of the three people on the cross. And when they came to Jesus, he was already dead. So in fact, they didn't break his legs. The reason you break the legs is so that you speed up the death, because the person can, with broken legs, and they obviously can't then take the weight through the legs, and so asphyxiation occurs quicker. And these Roman soldiers would be very used to seeing people crucified, and indeed they would be very good at telling when somebody has actually died. There would be no respiratory effort, so there would be no heaving of the chest, trying to breathe, and there would be no signs of life. And this is what we're told happened. The Roman soldier found that he was already dead. To be absolutely sure, he thrust his spear into the body. Now, remember that the Roman soldier is significantly lower down, standing on the ground with the body up, suspended on this cross. And what is likely to have happened in this case is that the spear was thrust up, probably into the abdomen, and then through the abdomen into the chest. We are told that the blood and water came out of the body. And my interpretation of that is that he would have the spear would have penetrated through the abdomen, the upper abdomen, below the rib cage, through the diaphragm, into the intrathoracic cavity. The water is probably due to a pleural effusion, which can occur during that dying process. And when that effusion is drained, that's fluid around the lung, essentially. When that fluid is drained, it can appear as straw-colored fluid, which interpreted as water. So there is no doubt, therefore, that Jesus was dead. It is, first of all, crucifixion is a fatal injury unless aborted, and then in addition to this, the spear into Jesus's side caused injuries which would lead to death if he wasn't already dead. But we're told that he was already dead.
Is it your professional view that the result of the crucifixion of Jesus would have been death? It has, for example, been suggested that Jesus was comatose for from his injuries and recovered in the tomb in which he was placed?
There's no way, in my professional opinion, that Jesus could have recovered in the in the tomb and recovered from a comatose state. That just isn't viable, judging by the injuries that he sustained.
Thank you. You may stand down. Call Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene, you are a close friend of Jesus of Nazareth. Where were you at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth?
Close friend and a follower, and I was with other close friends and followers of Jesus right at the foot of the cross, to be with him in his death. I was near his mother, Mary, and also the disciple John.
Oh yes, we are hearing from him next. After the crucifixion, where did you go?
Well, we'd followed him for a few years now, and that was the only reaction we had, was to carry on following him. You know, he brought to us eternal life, words of that. He brought to us healing, and then we thought he'd been snatched away from us, so we didn't want to let him out of our sight. So we followed him, we followed the body all the way to the tomb. And a few women, I think it was probably safer for us to be out that night. I think there was less suspicion cast on us because we were women. And so we got to the tomb, and then actually I sat with another Mary, Joseph's mother, and we sat nearby in a tomb just watching where Jesus' body had been laid.
Were you able to identify the tomb in which Jesus was laid?
Absolutely, absolutely. We went there ourselves. It was a new tomb built inside of a rock. It was a tomb of Joseph of Arimathea.
Yes, we've heard from him already. On the first day of the week, what did you do?
Well, because the crucifixion was on the Friday and there was no time to get the perfumes and spices to anoint the body because of Sabbath rest, that on the Saturday night we organised all that, and then we arranged to meet together as a group again on the Sunday morning early, as soon as the sun began to rise, so that we could go to the body of Jesus and just care for the body in a way that we couldn't care for him at all, watching him die. So we got the spices together, we left straight away. There's nobody around at this point, so we walked to the garden where the tomb was. And then I think it was halfway there, one of us mentioned the rock in front of the stone in front of the tomb, and how on earth, this massive stone, were we going to be able to move it? It was before anybody else would be around. And that's what we were talking about when we walked into the garden. And so we got there and we looked across at the tomb and we saw that the stone wasn't there. It had been rolled to one side. Our first reaction was brilliant. You know, it's a problem solved. I don't think we thought any more of it than that. I think we were so intent on going and looking after the body. So then we went in, of course, and that's when we looked around and we realised the body was not there. Jesus had gone. He was not in the tomb.
What did you do after you saw that the tomb was empty?
I think panic, if I'm being very honest, was the first reaction. We didn't understand what was going on. There'd been so much violence and hatred, and you know, the mob shouting, baying for blood, and it felt unsafe to be on the streets. And the night of the crucifixion, it was so horrendous, and you know, we panicked. Had they come? Had they taken the body away? Had they carried on that hatred? And maybe that was the reaction. And then we thought about the Roman soldiers and their part in the crucifixion, and their dislike of any thought of threat to power. And so we panicked. We didn't know where it would take him, but we just thought, surely this has to be enough. He's gone through enough already. He's suffered enough. Where would it end? And I think when we were discussing that, that's when we saw the two men in the tomb, whose first words were not to be afraid. And, you know, obviously it's already well saying that, but we absolutely were terrified. Not to be afraid. And then they said he was risen from the dead. That's why he wasn't there. And they told us to go and tell the disciples. And, you know, obviously, well, there was a kernel of hope, a kernel of joy, but we were afraid and we didn't believe straight away. I think we were still trying to process what was happening.
What did you do after that?
Well, I did something a bit different, and I did return to the tomb. I wanted to be where Jesus was last. I wanted to be where I knew he was last, to just to feel closer to him, to process what had happened. I think to grieve, I think to cry. And I think I did all those things. And it was whilst I was there crying that I bent down and looked into the tomb again. And that's when the two men spoke to me again, and they told me, well, they asked me why I was crying. And when I said Jesus, I begged them to tell me where his body had been taken, what had been done with him, where he'd gone. And then as I heard another voice behind me, and it was early in the morning, or a bit late, Sunday morning now, I guess. And the other voice asked me again why I was crying and, who am I looking for? And I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was there to work. So, I looked up eventually, and then he said the words Mary. And as he said the words, I absolutely knew this was Jesus. This was the man I'd followed for years now. This was the man who'd healed me. This is the man who I saw crucified, who was now risen from the dead.
Are you certain that the man with whom you spoke was Jesus of Nazareth?
I have absolutely no doubt. He did tell us he would raise from the dead. We couldn't comprehend it. We should have done. We'd seen the miracles, but we didn't comprehend it. He told us. But when he spoke, when I looked into his eyes, I heard his voice, I knew 100%. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was Jesus.
In your distress, could you have been mistaken? Is there any doubt in your mind that it was Jesus and that he was alive?
No, I think it's the opposite almost. I think Jesus had to speak through my distress and through my tears to actually get to me. And once I'd, stopped looking at everything through the prism of death and sadness I was feeling, and could actually focus on the words being said and think it through and see the man in front of me, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind. This was Jesus, and he was risen from the dead.
Thank you. Please step down. Call the next witness. John, a follower of Jesus. What are your name and occupation?
John Bar Zebedee. I'm a fisherman and a fish dealer from Galilee.
Can you tell the court where you were standing at the time of the crucifixion?
Yes, I was standing with some of the women from our company, and they'd also come to see the crucifixion. And I was near to the cross, so I could see the detail, could see what's happening, and I was able to hear as well everything that was happening. The things that Jesus was saying as well.
Could you see clearly?
Yes, very clearly.
Was Jesus of Nazareth in a strong physical condition when he was brought to the place of crucifixion?
No, he was in a bad way, really. He was bleeding from that flogging that he just received, and he was finding it hard to walk actually as well, and carrying the cross. And actually they had to call somebody from the crowd to come and help him to carry the cross. Yeah, he wasn't in a good state.
Can you describe the last few minutes of the crucifixion?
Well, one of the soldiers had a spear, and they had a sponge with vinegar in it, and they held that up to his lips so that they were moistened, and it's finished. Those were his words. That's what he said. It is finished. And then he just gave a loud shout, and he was dead.
Did you see the soldiers do anything to make sure that he was dead?
Well, yes, they actually put a spear into his side before they took him down off the cross, and I remember it actually very clearly, because I was surprised because water and blood was coming out from his side.
What happened to the body after the crucifixion?
One of the members of the Sanhedrin, actually, Joseph of Arimathea, I understand he asked for the body of Jesus, and then another member of the Sanhedrin as well. Both of them together took him and buried him actually in one of the tombs that belonged to Joseph of Arimathea.
Where did you go yourself?
Well, I'm ashamed to say really that I went to one of in a house that my family had access to in Jerusalem, and I stayed there really out of the way, if I'm honest. I didn't attract attention to myself because, we were fearing for our life. I didn't know if I was going to be arrested and, if I was going to be put to death myself. So I was keeping myself out of the way, if I'm honest.
You have told us what you saw at the crucifixion of Jesus. I'm now going to ask you to tell us about the events which followed, starting on the 16th of Nisan. Can you describe your visit to the tomb of Jesus of Nazareth on the morning of the 16th of Nisan?
Well, I was with Peter and in a house in Jerusalem, and then Mary Magdalene, she came in and was shouting, that they've taken the Lord out of the tomb and we don't know where they've taken him. So Peter and we ran down to the tomb, and when we got there, the stone had been removed, and I was just standing looking into the tomb, and then Peter came right past me and went in, and and when we went in there, it didn't look like anything violent had happened. The opposite, to be honest. It was the cloth, the cloth that they put around the body. It was actually folded and was on, where they put the body. So, I knew then that something special had happened to Jesus.
Were you expecting Jesus to be raised from the dead?
Well, no. I'm ashamed to say, because he talked about it many times, but I guess we didn't want to hear it. We weren't expecting to hear it, so we didn't really hear it. Even though he did talk about it many times. So no, when it happened, we were shocked.
Did you see Jesus alive later?
Oh yes. I was meeting with the other disciples. We were talking about what had been happening that day and what Peter and Mary, what the women had seen, and that Jesus was alive. And while we were talking, he actually came and stood in the middle of us in that room. He showed us his hands, and his side, and talked with us. I've been with Jesus for a long time. There was no doubt, that was him. And he talked with us for a good time, and then he went away. I'm not sure where he went from there, from the house.
Were there any other occasions?
Yes, he came and met us actually again in Jerusalem about a week later, and then when I went back to Galilee to to carry on fishing, and actually when we were fishing, then he came and appeared to us then, actually, when we were fishing, and a number of times when we were in Galilee, actually, and the other people saw him as well. In fact, on one occasion, I'd say there were at least 500 other people who saw him, at the same time, who saw him with us.
Did you steal the body of Jesus?
No, certainly not. No.
You are free to stand down. The next witness is one of Jesus' close group of disciples. Call Thomas Didymus. What is your name?
Thomas Didymus, from Galilee.
Were you one of the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth?
Yes, I was. I spent three and a half years with him whilst he was living, following him around.
Did you see the empty tomb?
I don't think there's anybody in Jerusalem that didn't see the empty tomb. There were many there for Passover that saw it, and I saw it too. But how that happened at the time, I didn't know.
Were you present at the alleged appearance of Jesus in Jerusalem on the 16th of Nisan?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't there, and I heard about it later from the other disciples. I couldn't believe what they were saying to me. I said to them, look, unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands and the mark of the spear in his side, there is no way that I am going to believe that Jesus is risen.
Why didn't you believe them?
Well, so many strange things had happened, and really my faith had been crushed. I couldn't believe that he was still alive. My faith had run out and I just doubted. And the Romans had done such a good job when I'd seen him on the cross that I couldn't believe that he could live once more.
Do you still not believe them?
Oh no, I believe now. Now I believe. I saw him later on. He came to us when we were in an upper room. All of the disciples were there and the doors were locked, and Jesus came and saw me and spoke to me and the other disciples. But he said to me, look, this is the hole in my hands. This is the hole in my side. Touch it. Now you can believe. And he said how blessed I was that I believed, but how blessed everybody else was because they believed before that.
Did you meet Jesus on any other occasion?
Yes, on several other occasions. When we were in Galilee, he came to see us several times, and there was no doubt on each occasion that it was Jesus and that he really was alive.
Thank you. You are free to stand down. I now call the guard who is guarding the tomb. What are your name and rank?
Lucius Didius Felix, corporal of the auxiliary cohort stationed in Jerusalem.
What were your duties on the 15th and 16th of Nisan?
I am in charge of 4 guards, and it was our duty to ensure that the seal on the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea was tight. We were also made to secure the perimeter to ensure that no one would be able to enter or exit the tomb, and we ensured that no one was able to come and steal the body of Jesus if they were to try.
What happened?
Well, on the night of the 16th of Nisan, we were standing guard, and I fell asleep just for a brief moment, and the disciples, they came and they stole the body of Jesus.
Are you telling me that you were asleep on duty?
Just for a moment, sir.
Have you had much experience of guard duty?
Yes, sir. During my service with this cohort, I've been asked to carry out guard duties on many an occasion.
Have you ever fallen asleep on guard duty before?
No, sir. Never, sir.
Did you receive any disciplinary action as a result of falling asleep on this guard duty?
Well, yes, I did, sir. I received 1 week in barracks, sir.
This seems rather a light sentence. What was the normal sentence for this offence?
Well, usually the offence would be punished quite harshly, but this time the priest had a word and got me a lawyer and allowed me only 1 week confined in barracks, sir.
Are the priests normally so helpful to auxiliaries like you?
No, sir, not usually, actually.
As you were asleep, how did you know it was the disciples of Jesus that stole the body?
Well, sir, I don't see how anyone else could have done it or would have wanted to do it.
Are you a light sleeper?
No, sir.
So why didn't the noise of the tomb being opened wake you?
I'm not too sure, sir. I'm not too sure.
We have heard that the stone which sealed the tomb was very heavy and would have taken a few men to move it. How much noise do you think there would be when the stone was removed from the doorway of the tomb?
Well, definitely quite a considerable amount of noise, sir.
And it still didn't wake you?
No, sir, I did not.
How many men were there in the guard?
There were 4, sir. I am sure of it.
And you say that all of you fell asleep and that none of you were woken by the commotion caused by the opening of the tomb?
No, sir. None of us were awoken.
What did you do when you woke up?
Well, I ran away. We all ran.
Why did you run away without investigating the tomb you were supposed to be guarding?
Well, I'm sure you'll understand, sir, but we were afraid that whatever had opened the tomb or had caused the earth tremor was still about.
I think I have heard enough. You can stand down. You have heard a considerable amount of evidence about the events surrounding the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus of Nazareth. It is now my task to sum up this evidence and to point out any possible conclusions that you may draw. Evidence point 1, the death of Jesus. You have heard evidence which testifies that Jesus of Nazareth was dead by the evening of 14th of Nisan, the day on which the crucifixion took place. His death was brought about by the crucifixion, but the spear thrust that he received would have ensured death had he not already been dead. The officer in charge of the execution has testified that he checked to see whether his prisoner was dead, and there has been evidence from 2 sources to show that the body of Jesus was left on the cross for an extended period after the spear thrust, which would be enough to ensure death in an unconscious man in itself. The evidence of the death of Jesus has not been challenged. Evidence point 2, the tomb was empty. You have also heard on the first day of the week, the body of Jesus was laid in a new tomb close to Jerusalem, and that tomb was empty. The fact that the tomb was new is significant. It means that the body could not have been mistaken for another body already in the tomb. The fact of the empty tomb was attested by Joseph of Arimathea, the owner of the tomb. But its existence so close to Jerusalem has become a matter of common knowledge. It is not challenged by anyone. The position of the stone which had been used to seal the door of the tomb is also significant. The stone would weigh more than a ton and would be quite difficult to move. The evidence we have received is that the stone was moved away from the tomb and that it was rolled into the garden in front of the tomb. This would take considerable effort, more than could be exerted by one man, and would create a very noticeable disturbance. Evidence point 3, witnesses to Jesus being alive after his crucifixion. The next piece of evidence is the witness of Jesus' disciples that they met Jesus alive after his crucifixion. The evidence of these witnesses is that Jesus was a real, solid person and not just an apparition. He spoke with them and answered questions. He touched some people and he ate food. The witnesses were certain that this could not be anyone else. The meetings with Jesus occurred on several occasions and with a number of different people. Over 500 witnesses have been mentioned, although it has been impossible to produce so many witnesses in the court. It is, however, true that all the witnesses so far have been disciples of Jesus. The question that needs to be answered here is one of how trustworthy the disciples of Jesus are as witnesses. We have heard that the disciples were not expecting Jesus to be raised from the dead. We have also heard that the disciples were demoralized by the death of Jesus and how their belief that Jesus had been raised from the dead changed their behavior. This seems unlikely to be the case if the disciples were knowingly given false evidence. There is also a problem of motive. By proclaiming their belief that Jesus of Nazareth has risen from the grave, the disciples risk persecution by the authorities and even death. They gain very little. An alternative explanation is that the disciples of Jesus stole his body for some reason of their own and then claimed that Jesus had risen from the dead. I do not find this credible for the reasons I have just stated. The evidence of the guard on the tomb also contains some inconsistencies, notably that the guard could not have seen if anyone stole the body while he was asleep, and that it is highly unlikely that none of the guards would have been woken by a group of men rolling the stone away. Conclusion. As this is a court of inquiry, no verdict will be presented at this time. Instead, the evidence will be considered carefully. I would also ask all of you watching to make the judgment for yourself. Is it reasonable to believe Jesus rose from the dead?